I'm Botanical Lich, and here's the bee. We have all seen the consequences of food and housing insecurity. There are some pretty obvious outcomes of living in those conditions. This video will not be about those obvious outcomes, or their solutions, because those, to be crass, are easy problems. To solve malnutrition, provide better food for cheaper prices or free to those who need it. To solve exposure and vagrancy, provide free and low-cost housing with no strings attached. These are first and foremost money and will problems. If we were willing to invest the money into solving these problems, then they could be solved. In 2024, the homeless population was estimated to be around 750,000. Even if we were to round that up to 1 million and use my own yearly grocery budget of around 5,000, it would cost only $1 billion to feed every homeless person for 1 year. A monumental task for any one little billionaire, but something that's completely within the realms of possibility for a government that is willing to shell out $40 billion in fossil fuel subsidies. With that amount of money, you could just go ahead and house all of those people as well. And you would still have $25 billion left over to turn into gold coins and dive into like a pool. That is why I say that these are money problems and will problems. The populace as a whole is unwilling to house and feed the needy, while being willing to subsidize large companies that are doing just fine on their own. Even though they are money problems and I have the will to solve them, I don't have the capital to do so, as I've only allowed myself $750 million for these thought experiments. Instead, I would like to look for some more specific and perhaps insidious problems facing those who are housing insecure, and a few that have to do with food insecurity. Constructive capitalism. Living with food and shelter insecurity. Let's start by asking, what is shelter? Actually, let's not, because that's a pretty dumb question. Instead, I'm going to break down my concerns into 3 main categories: property, wealth, logistics, like transportation, and hygienics. There will be some overlap between these categories, and you may not agree with how I classify these problems, but to be fair, I didn't put that much thought into it anyway. And it's my video. If you want to reorganize them, then you can make your own YouTube video. These problems and their suggested solutions will not be an all-encompassing solution to issues faced by those who are housing or food insecure, and I will likely return to just giving them money would be a way better solution multiple times. Let's start at the most obvious problem, the money problem. In other words, the wealth problem. In other words, the problem of property. Because all of those things are really the same thing. Property is a form of wealth. Wealth generally accumulated by the spending of money or other resources such as time. This might seem like a silly recursive argument, but I think it's a point that some people miss, and is one of the most important factors in how people misunderstand homelessness and housing insecurity. Every person advances through socioeconomic statuses the same way. Available resources are leveraged in order to gain skills, social capital, and materials required for higher-paying jobs. The wages and experience from the current job are used to procure more skills and materials. This is a rule that college, job experience, nepotism, and commuting all follow. Now imagine yourself in a situation where you have no money, no relationships, and no material resources. Your first step would likely be to get some money, through whatever means were available to you. Low-paying jobs, begging, or stealing. Perhaps you would skip making money altogether and directly steal a blanket and some food. No matter what anyone says, you now have more than you did at the beginning of the day. More wealth, a higher socioeconomic status, even if it's only a small step up. Imagine working enough that you now have secured a tent, a blanket, a pot, and a portable stove, as well as the kerosene needed to operate it. You have moved from needing to procure prepared food to being able to buy cheaper ingredients that you can prepare yourself. Your blanket no longer gets ruined every time it rains, and you have somewhere that you can remove and maintain your clothing without being in danger of being arrested. Your expenses now consist mostly of getting enough food and water to survive and cleaning your clothes. Using the funds that you accumulate, you buy yourself a bicycle and prepare to start looking for somewhere within biking distance that you can get a permanent job in order to earn a stable income. Then, one day, Your tent is destroyed, your blanket thrown out, your stove and bike are confiscated, and you are told to find a new place to exist. It would be comparable, if not worse, than your apartment burning down on the same day your car was totaled by an uninsured driver. Because in that situation, you would likely still have a job, the funds in your bank account, and a network of people who could help you through your tragedy. The confiscation and destruction of homeless people's property is not only theft and vandalism, but completely antithetical to the entire point of the actions themselves. You want homeless people to get off the streets? The least you could do is give them an opportunity to gather the resources that would be required to do so. Aside, getting them off the streets. While some people might say that getting homeless and housing insecure people inside is the first and foremost task as it pertains to their well-being, I'm not sure that I agree. Many homeless shelters have time or bed limits, and low capacity for taking care of the belongings of the individuals using them. They will frequently force people to change their habits and behaviors, from when they wake up and eat to kicking out people who are addicted to drugs. As for the logistics side of things, most, if not all of them, are placed in locations that are not conducive to the needs of the homeless. Homeless shelters are frequently placed in poorer, less reputable parts of their towns, places that are not conducive to begging or solicitation, the only legal options that are available to many homeless people, if they even are legal where they live. These locations are not conducive to looking for jobs, as they are far away from the plentiful low-pay, entry-level positions of strip malls and shopping centers. Transportation is more of an issue than usual, because even if the shelter provides a safe place to store a bike or scooter, it still means hours of travel time. Frequently, a homeless person may have better prospects at earning money and finding work living on the street in a more active part of town than in a shelter. So, what solutions could a billionaire implement to facilitate the accumulation of wealth and property? I would consider creating a system of lockers and/or self-storage units that are made available for free to low-income parties, optimally available 24 hours a day. This would allow people to store their accumulated wealth in locations where it would be safe. Some barriers arise to how best to allow access, whether it's an identification key checkout system, a PIN code, or some other form of check, as well as how to allow consistent access to a group of people whose lives are, by necessity, highly mobile. These questions flow smoothly into our next topic, logistics. I'm defining logistics as any non-wealth or property-based problem that could interfere with someone's life. Most people solve these problems in their everyday lives by simply paying for the solutions, but that option generally isn't available to those who are housing or food insecure. If you're worried about having enough money to buy your next meal, you won't be willing to spend $10 to get across town. It's important to either bring resources and opportunities to the locations where vulnerable populations are, or, more realistically, to provide those people with cheap and easy travel options to where those resources and opportunities are. This would be easy to solve for someone that had $750 million to throw around, at least on a small scale. For places with public transportation already in place, free and direct express routes should be established between low-income population centers and high job availability places like shopping centers and downtown areas. Too frequently, public transportation for low-income individuals can include over an hour of commuting. This happens because the limited funds transportation receives are used to cover large areas, not to create time-efficient systems. By expanding funding and then creating hubs in population centers with direct routes to commerce centers, overall travel time for these people should be able to be reduced. As for more direct interventions, creating a private bus or transportation system for the use of those who are low income or for those who are using storage solutions provided above, where they can call a collect number from any phone and just give the name of a nearby business to be picked up quickly, would greatly reduce the stress and requirements of transportation for these individuals. Honestly, providing transportation solutions would likely be a necessary addition to any sort of storage or property program, as not being able to access your property is not much of an improvement from having that property confiscated. Tangent. Hostile food environments. It might be strange to think of food as a logistics problem, but I think that's what it is for many people. There are plenty of people who could afford to meet their caloric intake needs, if not even their nutritional needs, if they had access to the same foods that are available to people who have ready transportation and nearby market centers. Food deserts are a thing that exist. A wild sentence to say out loud. There are multiple definitions for food deserts, but I'm more interested in the feeling than the definition, so instead I'll call what I'm talking about hostile food environments. I consider a hostile food environment to be any area where you cannot find fresh fruits and vegetables and raw or unprocessed proteins within 15 minutes of walking. If these requirements are not met, then it can be difficult for an individual or family to fulfill their nutritional needs. More important is what can be present in a hostile food environment, mainly fast food, delis, and restaurants. These establishments may be able to provide the calories needed and may even be able to meet nutritional needs, but this doesn't mean much if the price of the food is prohibitive. Hostile food environments usually show up in low-income communities, which are the same communities that frequently can't afford the time or money to travel to fulfill their nutritional needs. It is true that fresh foods aren't always cheaper than processed ones, and cooking can be time restrictive for individuals working multiple jobs, but raw and frozen vegetables and fruits used as supplements to fast food or microwave meals can make a massive difference in meeting nutritional goals, and can stretch those other products to go further. A money solution for this money problem could be an at-cost market. At cost meaning that while the store wouldn't be giving away their products for free and wouldn't necessarily be a non-profit, it would lower its prices until it operated at a negligible profit margin. I don't know a lot about grocery stores or their margins, but the fact that many foods will go on sale for half of their initial prices indicates to me that there is a lot of margin to play with. Why not a food pantry, you might be asking? And food pantries are good, and free food is better than cheap food, but food pantries frequently come with their own setbacks. They rely on the donations of others rather than being self-sufficient, and they run off volunteer hours. This combination means that food pantries generally operate off strict schedules, which can conflict with the busy schedules of people who could really benefit from their services. An at-cost market, on the other hand, could provide work for a low-income neighborhood, while being much more flexible in its hours. I'm not saying that an at-cost food market would be better than a food pantry, but rather that there is space for both, like Coke and Pepsi, or McDonald's and Burger King, or guillotines and hanging. The lack of fresh produce in hostile food environments is something that I would chalk up to my favorite symptom of late-stage capitalism. Not just profit, but the most profit. Grocery chains can make a lot more money in an affluent area like near the suburbs than they can in poorer neighborhoods, so they build all of their new buildings in more profitable areas, leaving poorer areas with few food choices. Before we move past logistics and move on to the final section of the video, I need to throw in the idea of permanent addresses. It can be easy to forget how many problems are solved, or are never problems in the first place, when you have the state-sanctioned permanent address available in your pocket. Driver's licenses and state-issued IDs not only provide evidence for identification, but also for permanent addresses, something that is required in many places for things like voting, receiving government benefits, and of course, applying for jobs. There are rules governing what counts as a permanent address, as well as what can qualify someone for an exemption to those requirements, and what can replace the permanent address in those cases. It would be great if we could take our nonprofit storage solutions and double it up as a place for people to claim as an alternative to having a permanent address, as well as somewhere where they can receive important communications like mail. Circling back to applying for jobs, I'm sure that you've heard of the idiom, dress to impress. Unfortunately, many jobs and workplaces expect applicants to present themselves better for interviews than they would even be normally expected to for work, something that can be out of reach for someone who is housing insecure. This creates additional roadblocks for those that are already struggling to make ends meet. These could also be seen as logistics problems, but they're ones that I felt could use their own section, because it tends to expand into so many aspects of someone's life. In the United States, and other places I'm sure, We're socialized to see unkemptness as a negative social trait. It's connected to slovenliness, rudeness, and other antisocial propensities. These stereotypes can be reasonable if misguided when applied to people who have the means to correct their appearance and behaviors, but when there is a population that does not have access to those means, it creates an unfounded bias. People judging others based on something that they have little to no control over. Thankfully, there are already some pretty ingenious ideas that can help solve these problems, but they have yet to be widely adopted. There are laundry and hygienic trucks that are deployed to natural disasters so that relief workers and victims can have access to clean clothing and showers. These trucks have already started being deployed in places like Los Angeles and Denver to help homeless individuals. Clothing can be a difficult problem for many underhoused people. Fabrics can be difficult to protect from the environment, and once they are dirtied or wet, they can become unusable quite quickly. Providing a place, or more literally delivering a place, to wash clothes could drastically reduce not only the barriers to the job market for underhoused people, but their everyday costs of living. Laundry and hygiene trucks could be stocked with low-cost tracksuits for use while clothing is being washed, and possibly for distribution if necessary. This would mean that people could wash even the garments that they walk in with, which is important for people who may only have 1 or 2 changes of clothes. This creates a place where people can go where it is appropriate and, more importantly, safe to wash their clothes themselves and to do minor medical interventions, like cleaning out cuts and cleaning and drying sores and rashes. Not to mention the medical benefits and comfort that are provided simply by being clean. This goes doubly for women, transgender people, and gender non-conforming individuals, who not only are frequently held to a higher standard of cleanliness, but can also have additional material and hygienic needs because of their menstrual cycles. I could go on and on about simple things that something like a laundry or hygiene truck could be equipped with to assist with other small problems. Antibiotics, steroid creams, tampons, and pads. But this script is already longer than usual, and I haven't gotten to the reason why we really all are here. Billionaire bashing. Before we do, though, I will throw in the obligatory, if the government just provided every individual with something like $1,000 a month, the rates of food and insecurity and underhousedness would drop dramatically. Or if they instituted right to housing and right to food protocols that everyone basically believes in, but the government doesn't want to say because then we'd actually have to do them. In reality, I shouldn't be flippant about these measures. $1,000 in cash or housing credits a month would bring most homeless people all the way to affording a place to stay. Especially if they buddied up with a friend, which basically everyone has to do now anyway. Here we are. What the fuck are rich people doing? At first, I thought that maybe I could make some broader philosophical arguments about how the rich aren't really doing much directly to impact those that are housing or food insecure, and that they're more negative forces in the world generally that just happen to make everyone else's lives worse. But then I thought about all the rich people who are so out of touch that they don't know how expensive groceries are, so I'm feeling a little punchy. In the widest sense, rich people are in charge of how much things cost, and how much people are paid. But there are other things that some people would argue would affect these things more, like supply and demand, and fiduciary responsibilities, etc. See my recent short about being moral on the stock market for more about fiduciary responsibilities, and check out other things while you're there too. More succinctly, the people who are deciding when jobs should be cut, always, and what things can withstand price hikes, necessities, are the richies. They make changes to their companies so that number go up. But the economy is a zero-sum game. That means that someone else's number has to go down. And generally, those costs trickle down to those that are already less privileged than others. Those who have little ability to defend themselves and no one to pass that cost down to. In other words, the poorest of the poor get poorer. Similarly, the rich and powerful are the ones that are deciding what areas are profitable enough to put grocery stores, and more importantly, where they don't have enough incentive to put one. This allows places like convenience stores, quick marts, and restaurants to be more predatory with their pricing in hostile food environments, as they are the only easily accessible options. And, of course, there is the fact that land and property, especially residential land and property, have become investment vehicles. Rich people and people of privilege buying up land that they don't intend to use for themselves for the express purpose of extracting wealth from those who need places to live. I'll likely go on a ramble, or more likely a rant, about that topic later, but we don't have time to unpack that all right now. Essentially, rich people are controlling the prices and the wages. By tightening from both sides, there is no other outcome than more and more casualties. More and more people becoming insecure in their housing, not knowing where their next meal will be coming from, and not being able to keep up with the cost of being alive. I think the direction for this particular call for action should be pretty clear. Forgo one small discretionary purchase this week. Think a bag of chips or a trip to McDonald's, and instead donate that money to someone who is suffering from food or housing insecurity. Give the money directly, either to a food bank or homeless shelter. I would suggest trying to find one in your local area who can make that money go further than you could if you were to buy and give food instead. Or give it directly to someone that you see. I think that some people get worried about direct giving for all sorts of reasons, but I think most of them are overblown. First of all, people know what they need best, whether it's an indulgence to relieve stress, gas to get their car home, or a sandwich from the deli section because they really need food right now. Particularly for me, it feels like my generation was inundated with the myth of the fake beggar, that these people would beg for money and then go home to their penthouse apartments and flat-screen TVs. In my opinion, anyone standing out in the cold or the rain on a street corner for hours on end is doing worse off than me. Someone who is willing to hand a stranger a $10 bill. And that means that you did something good. You helped someone who has less than you, whether or not that was the most efficient way to use your money. I am going to donate $30 to a local food bank. And for each person who says that they've donated $5 to a food bank, homeless shelter, or through mutual aid, I'll add another dollar to that. If all 20 people who usually watch my long-form videos do that, we'll donate $150. That's enough for 25 people to eat a meal. That might not seem like a lot, but it's important that you don't get lost in the extremes. While the big problems will require big solutions that are beyond any of us individually, you can help the people around you with small problems, all by yourself. I do want to thank everyone that made it to the end of the video, and especially at GunpowderGertie on Instagram for my new channel banner/end card. If you could leave a like or subscribe if you're not already, that would really help me out, and I would appreciate it. I'll check back in on the donation comments in a couple of weeks, probably after Christmas, because I'm traveling near the holidays.